Last night, during Timcast IRL, we got word. Mike Lindell had been raided by the FBI. They stopped him while he was out on a trip, surrounded his car, issued him a subpoena, told him not to tell anybody, and then took his cell phone. Now, initially, this was just reported by Mike Lindell, and some people questioned whether or not he was a reliable source. We now have confirmation from the New York Times that Mike Lindell has been served with a search warrant. His phone was seized. He was telling the truth. And this is what we expected. Mike Lindell is not the kind of guy to lie about this. I certainly think he's been wrong about a lot of things, but that's fine. He's the pillow guy. I don't expect him to be the news or scientist guy. But he was telling the truth about what happened to him. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Civil War, I guess. I don't know how to explain it in any other way. It's fifth generational civil war. It is. It's not cold civil war. I mean, maybe you can call it that because hot civil war implies kinetic conflict. But we had a Cold War, with the Soviet Union and the United States, NATO, and there was still proxy conflict. It was a Cold War. Yeah, but we were in Vietnam. We were in Korea. We were in Afghanistan. So war was actually happening. I think Cold War still implies that there's going to be conflict, and perhaps we see that proxy conflict with Black Lives Matter protests and rioting and things like that, perhaps. So maybe you want to call it a cold civil war, but I'm going to call it fifth generational warfare. And let me tell you why. Here's some good news for Trump supporters. Trump backing Brigadier General beats moderate GOP candidate in New Hampshire Senate primary in key battle before midterms, while former Trump staffer aged just 25 wins her House battle. Don Bolduc, a staunch supporter of Trump, won his Tuesday primary after the state's Senate President Chuck Morse conceded. So why is this fifth generational warfare, my friends? Well, for this reason. David Axelrod, you know him, you love him, director at Shy Politics, senior political commentator on CNN. Oh, yeah, he said, another far-right election denier wins, this time in New Hampshire. Feels like the Republicans are doing everything possible to frustrate their chances of regaining control of the Senate. Here's the truth. Stephen L. Miller says, you absolute effing ridiculous clown. And he links to this story from the New York Post, which reads, the final two races targeted by Democrats will be decided Tuesday in New Hampshire. In the Republican primary for the right to take on incumbent Senator Maggie Hassan, the Senate Majority PAC, which is aligned with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat, has forked out $3.2 million on ads endorsing retired Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc. Well, hold on there a minute. They spent $3.2 million on ads endorsing him? New York Post? Yo, that's crazy. From the New York Post. Democrats spend $53 million to boost far-right GOP candidates despite rhetoric. So we'll come back to that. But we got to talk about Mike Lindell and how this all loops together. We'll give an honorable mention to Tim Ryan saying the U.S. needs to kill and confront the extremist Republican movement. And I'll explain to you why we are in a fifth generational civil war. It could be a revolution. Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. But I explain it this way. Imagine you go back in time. You meet with Sir Genghis Khan. I don't actually think he was a Sir, but you get my point. And you tell him, assuming you can speak his language or whatever. Let's just say you got a universal translator, a time machine, everything's just perfect. And you say, sir, how would you like it if I could provide you the tools to conquer all of your opponents, rivals, and every nation that stood before you without raising a sword, without firing one arrow? He would say, magic, lies. How could it be possible? The people must be conquered. That's the only way to gain control. You say, I will trick them and convince them. And before you know it, without his sword being raised, they will bow before you as their savior. Surely he would say, okay, prove it to me. Do it. Nobody would choose kinetic conflict if they could avoid it because it's expensive. We're in a new era, my friends. Manipulation, media, politics, that's how the game is played. Political persuasion. So this is where we are now. Mike Lindell is served with a search warrant. The FBI has been weaponized and is going after all of the Trump supporters. Not all of them, but Trump's main top supporters and allies. They don't need a conviction. They need the manipulation. This is the game they're going to play. They've spent $53 million in propping up Trump-endorsed candidates. Trump-endorsed candidates are winning. Now they're filing subpoenas, the DOJ weaponized by the Democrats, against Trump supporters. This is what you'll get. We're less than 2 months away, so the commercials will probably start popping up very soon. You're going to see commercials showing Steve Bannon being perp walked. That's what they did. They arrested Steve Bannon, put him in cuffs, and they make him walk down the hallway in front of all the press so they can get all the different shots of Steve Bannon being perp walked. The commercials are going to say, Donald Trump is a criminal and his supporters are criminals. Don't vote for the criminals. You see, a lot of people will be persuaded. A lot of people don't understand the concept of innocent until proven guilty. Even now, the media has repeatedly stated that pleading the fifth makes you a bad person. Hey, props to Trump because he said something similar. Walked it back recently when he pled the fifth, pleaded the fifth. Now you have Mike Lindell being served with a search warrant. It doesn't matter if he did anything wrong. What matters is the news is going to be like the FBI targeting, these people, criminals. They're going to do clever things with language. They don't need to say that Mike Lindell did anything wrong. They can say the FBI files subpoenas, search warrants against Trump allies, accused of crimes. Do not be complicit. Do not support the criminals. That's why I say this is a civil war. Because the Democrats are funding the people that they claim are the bad guys. They're coming out and they're saying, MAGA are the bad guys. You can't support them. Hey, let's go spend money supporting their campaigns. Here's the funny thing. YouTube has a new policy. Maybe it's not a new policy, but YouTube says that if you confuse people about the election, you'll be banned. YouTube, question. Are you going to ban all the Democrats and their ads because they're manipulating the election? No? What was that? Nothing? Nothing, huh? Okay. That's what I figured. In the meantime, it is confirmed that they went after Mike Lindell. Let's read a little bit about this, and we'll break down more of what's going on. The New York Times says, Mike Lindell, a prominent promoter of 2020 election misinformation, was served with a search warrant, and his cell phone was seized by FBI agents who questioned him about his ties to a Colorado county clerk who was accused of tampering with voting machines, Mr. Lindell said. Tina Peters, the county clerk in Mesa County, Colorado, is under indictment on state charges related to a scheme to download data from election equipment after the 2020 presidential contest. Ms. Peters has pleaded not guilty to the charges. The search is a sign that a federal investigation into Ms. Peters has reached a prominent figure in the national movement to investigate and overturn the 2020 election. Can I just pause there and just say that is the stupidest thing I've ever read? The search is not a sign that it happened. It is news that it happened. Literally, you have it. New York Times, your headline is MyPillow's Mike Lindell served a search warrant. Lindell, the chief executive and founder of MyPillow, is a major promoter of the debunked theories that keep alive the false notion that the election was stolen from former President Donald Trump. Okay, let's pause for a second. What do you mean by stolen? That's the question. What does stolen mean? I don't like any of this stuff because I feel like it strawmans the Democrats right before an election. Y'all need to be operating as though the Democrats are primed to win, and you need to be knocking on doors, registering people to vote. Scott Pressler can do it. You can do it too. Go door to door, meet your neighbors, register people to vote. That's what you got to do. But see, a lot of people say it was stolen from him. Yeah, some people like Mike Lindell believe there was a conspiracy and fraud and a bunch of crazy things. And I'm like, I roll my eyes at this stuff. And I'm like, come on, guys. No. We don't need none of that. We don't need to believe in conjecture and circumstantial evidence that won't do anything for us. Now, if you want to argue that Time Magazine put out an article that says the shadow campaign to save the election, that article called it a conspiracy to stop Trump. And Sam Harris actually said there was one. Okay, well, out of their own mouths, if that's what you're saying, sure. What you got to understand is that it was procedural. What happened in 2020 was procedural, meaning a year in advance, the Republicans cut a deal with Democrats in Pennsylvania to allow universal mail-in voting. That's not, you can call it whatever you want. I don't know. I'm not going to say it's not anything. I'm going to say that's what it was. They agreed to it. And it was challenged in court, and those challenges ultimately lost. So what do you want to call it? Now, you may believe it's unfair. Fine by me. You may say that means it was stolen. Fine by me. But what we're talking about is a question of the constitutionality of early voting, universal mail-in voting, and ballot harvesting. In many states, ballot harvesting is legal, which is why I simply say right now, this narrative isn't helping. What will help? Winning local elections, winning primaries. That's what will help. Democrats know that procedural changes can only go so far. There's been some rulings like there's an initial ruling that universal mail-in voting was unconstitutional, but I think ultimately the state Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said it was going to remain. In Wisconsin, they said those unmanned ballot drop boxes were illegal. I think they said they're going to keep those for now. I don't know. We'll see. Y'all need to be filing suit. I know a lot of these were thrown out, but y'all need to be doing this now, issuing legal challenges in the fair and legal manner by which the legal challenges should be brought about. And you should be voting in local elections so that you can enact proper, sound procedural policy on how these elections are run. That being said, I do understand that many of these people being targeted by the FBI were trying to do just that. And that's why I say, welcome to the Civil War, my friends. When you have people going on TV and saying Article, X of the Constitution states that we should do Y, and we're going to go to the courts and we're going to win, and then the feds go after those people, yeah, that's crazy. That's when we're looking at, and I shouldn't say civil war, but revolution, the weaponization of the DOJ. And then what? What can be done? You better come out and vote and get your friends to vote. And that's what matters. Now, I'll say this of the Democrats. The reason why I think we're in civil war territory, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. That's it. I don't know what else to say. I mean, if people feel like they cannot get a redress of grievances, then it's just it. It's over. Violence will happen. Now, I think Democrats want that. I do. I think Democrats want it as evidenced by them propping up the Trump supporters, making sure that these are the people that are prominent and win. They're telling you these people are the bad guys, but then they're paying for them to win and then going, oh, no, they're winning. This is exactly what David Axelrod did. This guy should be banned for election manipulation and interference. Such dirty, pathetic games. The Democrats are funding this, according to the New York Post, Democrat-aligned PACs, and then claiming it's the apocalypse. Yep. So where do we go? Where does that bring us? The demonization leads to insane things like Tim Ryan saying they need to kill and confront the extremist Republican movement. Okay, 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. You want to call it extremist, you want to say whatever you want to say about it, fine. But you need to understand this is the majority of Republicans. They like Trump. They like America. They like free speech. They like individual liberties. They don't like the Democrats. They think the Democrats are bad people. And then Tim Ryan comes out and says, I'm going to work with Republicans and I'm going to work across the aisle, but not the extremist ones. So what, the neocons, the war hawks, the warmongers? Where do you think this leads? Here's my fear. The Democrats are propping up these extremist narratives, and they're doing this because they want to back Trump supporters into a corner to force them to get violent just before the election. Trump supporters fear that Democrats will stage false flag attacks to demonize Republicans as just that right before the midterms. So they can say, don't let the Maggie Republicans win. They're so dangerous. We warned you about this. It's a civil war. Fifth generational civil war. The Democrats, according to the news we have from the New York Post, are propping up their opponents. They are setting the stage for violence while claiming that they're terrified of it. It's happening right in front of your faces. So how do we get out of something like this? Honestly, I don't have the answers. I don't know. I think the most important thing is, look, share this video. The most important thing is people need to know it's happening. They need to know it's happening so that they can resist the manipulation. People should not get violent. Nobody should. And I know the Trump supporters know this, but there are many that are like, oh, no. If you're a Trump supporter, if you're a Republican, if you're a moderate, if you're a libertarian, you should be doing everything in your power to make sure people do not get violent. That people just advocate, register voters, and go out and vote. Massive red wave. A red great flood. People need to go out with smiles on their faces, shaking hands and waving and voting. And then voting these people out, the Democrats. And then in November, Once they get the power of the House, maybe not the Senate, we'll see, they can start launching some investigations. And that's what the Democrats are truly afraid of. And I think they'll stop at nothing to make sure that doesn't happen. Democrats and Republicans alike believe doomsday and civil war loom large. I've been referencing this data. People keep reporting on the same data. This is YouGov data. Everyone thinks the end is nigh. We are well past the point where historically people would flee the country. And I've been talking about this quite a bit. I've been thinking about it. I lived in South Jersey. The violence got bad. I fled. Got out. When people left Germany, as things were starting to get bad, Germany is not that large of a place relative to the United States. So they fled to other European countries and some fled to the U.S. I was in South Jersey and the violence started getting bad. The crime was skyrocketing and the rioters crossed the bridge into my sleepy suburban area. And then I was just like, we can't wait around. I could hear the sirens and I was like, this is nuts. We're across a river. And South Jersey is a peninsula, so it's like, you don't want to get trapped there. So we moved away from it. It's about a 3-4 hour drive or so. And I thought, you know what? That is very similar. Relative distance. People left Germany to France, to Spain, to the UK, to other countries to avoid the conflict. Not everybody got out of Europe during World War II, but a lot of people started leaving and going to neighboring countries because they saw how bad it was getting. The problem is it's getting bad in all of the U.S. So I can't predict what's going to happen. But I already know that a lot of people are fleeing the country. We talked about this on IRL. There are stories about immigration lawyers pointing out wealthy liberals are fleeing the U.S. They're going to countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, small, Bahamian or Caribbean, whatever. Not the Bahamas, it's Caribbean, because Bahamas, I think, is a country, right? They're going to small islands. They're paying, I think it's $500,000 for what's called a golden passport. You become a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. You store your money there. You don't pay taxes, and then you get a passport that's better than a U.S. one. Golden passports. That's right. I've heard stories of people who've been doing this for a long time. It's been around for a while. There are many countries, most countries allow economic citizenship. That is, if you're ultra wealthy, they want you to come there and bring your money. Small island nations offer this up. Some are cheaper than others. I've heard some will offer it for like $50,000. So they want the money. And the crazy thing is often you don't even got to give them the money. You put it in a bank in their country because then their bank has access to it to issue loans and do all that stuff. And they're like, you're good. Here's your passport. And then these people have an escape should things get crazy and things get violent. Right now, many people are heading to El Salvador. I don't want to call that fleeing necessarily because the El Salvador has implemented Bitcoin as its national currency. They instantly gave everyone, I think, like $30 in Bitcoin, banking the nation overnight. Crime dropped. The economy is expanding rapidly. And now people are building cities based on Bitcoin. It's becoming the Bitcoin capital of the world. And so people are leaving, heading down to El Salvador. Tempting. Very tempting. I'm not going anywhere just yet. But I have been talking about how I'm looking at El Salvador, mainly because of the Bitcoin thing. I think it's fantastic. But I got to tell you, my friends, we stay and we remain in that political battle. We remain in that we have an election coming up and we have to win. We have to vote. We have to vote for American values. We have to vote to push back on the extremism. And we need accountability. We need to vote to stop the overreach of the FBI and what the Democrats are doing. And we need to win to make that happen. However, be warned. The DOJ has already gone after sitting members of Congress. I'm not sure there's a path out of this conflict, but I'm not pessimistic. My view is the U.S. may collapse. It may break up. It may just lose its status in the world. It may become a shell of its former self. But that doesn't mean things will be bad. I mean, that is bad in and of itself. But I'm saying, like, you will live. You will be safe. You will be with your family. And you will find a way. I believe you will. Many people who live out in the middle of nowhere are self-sufficient to a great degree already. So I don't think that it's that apocalyptic necessarily. I think that it may just be the demise of the American empire and institution globally. And you're going to get by. Now, cities may get real bad in the event of a hard collapse. That's the reality we face. And that's the problem of the cities. So I can't tell you, man. I can't predict the future. At some point, maybe I find myself chilling in El Salvador on the beach, living a much simpler life, because the dream can only last for so long. But for the time being, I'm going to stay and say I love this country and it must succeed and its institutions must be held accountable. And what's the right word I'm looking for? Reformed. Reformed in such a sense, not that they're dismantled. No, I think many of our institutions are okay, but they need to be reformed. Our media needs to be reformed. We are doing that right now, you and I, with this video. Our law enforcement institutions need to be reformed because I think law enforcement serves an important and vital role for this country. But there must be accountability. If Democrats can weaponize the DOJ and do what they're doing, they are ripping this country apart. They're doing it because they're scared to lose. They're doing it because they don't want to be held accountable. We need accountability. Change must happen. It's the only way. So if we win, when we win in the election, we can have these investigations and maybe come 2024, we put an end to this. And the collapse will happen to some degree, I suppose, because empire can't last forever. But then we'll all get by. Donald Trump was doing very important things to preserve this country, bringing back manufacturing. I have to wonder if the real goal was to dismantle the U.S. from within, and Donald Trump shoring up our borders, bringing manufacturing back was only bolstering this country from within. They certainly can't have that. I think many Democrats want to see our wealth transferred to China. That's the reality of things. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.